Incredulity. If an average person in the United States wakes up today and hears that tens of thousands of Russian soldiers are abandoning the front according to a recent report, that men with no combat experience are being sent to a real slaughter, while corrupt elites enjoy champagne, that knot-in-the-throat feeling is inevitable. We are witnessing in real time how an army once believed invincible is collapsing morally and strategically, and the entire world, including the United States, will have to face the consequences. This story does not begin with heroic acts, but with grandiose promises. Putin promised to protect the Russian-speaking population, stop NATO expansion, and reclaim historical territories. However, according to the cited documents, the so-called special operation has turned into a bloody and endless battle, with towns in Donbass changing control every few weeks, and soldiers losing their comrades over fragments of land not worth a drop of spilled blood. From an American citizen's perspective, this is not a distant conflict. The stability of Europe, global supply chains, energy prices, and the possibility that a regime which, according to the report, should endure more than 1 million casualties, dead and wounded, and around 250,000 deaths, might resort to dangerous escalation to hide its weakness are all at stake. The gap between propaganda and reality is reflected in every line. Cold, hungry, and wounded soldiers wondering why they are still there. Young recruits clash with officers, who reportedly employ Soviet tactics that send men into open fields. Business Insider reports mention daily losses of thousands in intense combat, a clear sign of a system that wears down people like ammunition. There is also the technological gap, which we in the United States have observed since 2022. The drone, war, electronic interference systems, precision missiles. The report describes phobias of drones and a constant fear of the sky, with buzzing over the trenches paralyzing men even during meals before the next explosion falls upon them. If in the United States you think of Afghanistan or Iraq, you know morale is not an abstract concept. It is decisive for war. According to the source, more than 50,000 Russian soldiers have already deserted. Others surrender, because being a prisoner seems more rational than senseless death. Added to this are family fractures, mothers, and wives with signs on May 9th silently pleading for their son's return, unpaid salaries, compensations that never arrive, an economy that, as described, is turning into a war machine, while inflation devours what little remains. This is not just a military earthquake, but a social one. Particularly explosive for Russia's internal stability, and thus risky globally, are the dark tactical aspects narrated in the report. Mobile crematoriums to hide numbers, barrier units behind their own troops, brutal punishments for deserters including extreme measures like tying up victims to deter drone attacks. Images that, if even partly true, reveal a system based on fear rather than loyalty. Added to this is the collapse of the Wagner structure after the 2023 rebellion, Prigozhin's death, and distrust reaching the high military command. All this indicates that the chain of command and trust is cracking. And then there is the most shameful solution. According to the report, the Kremlin resorted to foreign fighters, including thousands of North Koreans, many of whom died shortly after being sent in massive attacks, a symbol turning Russia's aspiration to be a superpower into a global humiliation. If you live in the United States, all this does not read like an adventure novel but as a clear warning. A nuclear state with declining morale, growing paranoia, and economic pressure can become unpredictable for Europe, energy prices, our markets, and troops deployed in NATO and its surroundings. According to a transcript, it is claimed that Putin, at a summit in Alaska with Donald Trump, rejected any peace proposal and instead demanded more territory. Whether this scene is credible or not, it perfectly fits the pattern of rejection described in the document. Maintaining the stance at all costs. In the United States, this is known as doubling down, a risky reaction that has caused the fall of empires. The report draws historical parallels with figures and events such as Nicholas II, the Vietnam War, and recent coups in Africa. Although not conclusive proof, they serve as echoes resonating with the current situation. When troops lose the sense of their mission, the system risks collapsing from within. Here lies the crucial point. According to the text, Ukraine is not only recovering territory but also gaining popular support. Its goals are clear: defend the homeland, protect family freedom, while on the other side, cynicism, corruption, and weariness flourish. For our audience, this means the conflict between Russia and Ukraine has become a battle between truth and narrative, morality versus machinery, drone warfare against human waves. The reality this story reflects is harsh and precise. Keywords like Putin, drone war, Wagner collapse, North Korean contingent, Donbass stalemate, war economy, global energy prices, and NATO not only attract clicks but also explain why this front line affects wallets, gas stations, and stock markets in the United States. The question that remains, and which I want to pose to you, is this. If according to this version the conflict is no longer fought for victory but for resistance, how will it end? Will it be through negotiations, exhaustion, or an internal collapse, causing a new wave of global shock? Delving deeper reveals a picture that for any American is not only shocking but alarming. A war that began, according to the transcript, with liberation propaganda has become a whirlwind that wears down Russia not only militarily but also socially and economically, triggering global domino effects. Imagine more than 1 million casualties. With approximately 250,000 documented deaths, a generation of men lost, while the Kremlin continues to speak of a historic mission. For us in the United States, this sounds like a nightmare. What happens when a weakened nuclear state acts desperately just to maintain its image? According to the material, not even wealthy cities are on the front lines. Moscow or St. Petersburg are not the main scenes, but poor regions like Dagestan or Buryatia. The burden of losses falls on the forgotten. This inequality evokes memories of any unjust war we've experienced and contains an explosive force that could destroy the regime from within. But even more dramatic is the technological gap. Russian soldiers report that Ukrainian drones dominate the sky. Western precision weapons destroy their positions while their own communication devices fail. The term dronophobia, coined by combatants, goes beyond a simple word. It expresses the absolute panic felt when every meal is consumed under the buzzing of potentially lethal eyes. For us in America, this means we are witnessing in real time how asymmetric warfare is pointing the way to the future. Drones facing massive technologies, outdated doctrines, and a nation that, unable to innovate, sacrifices its soldiers as if they were pieces on a chessboard. Added to this, living conditions are unbearable. Broken boots, spoiled rations, corruption in supply chains, and mobile crematoriums that, according to reports, make bodies disappear to manipulate figures. This represents not only a military problem, but an absolute moral collapse. For years, American analysts have warned that when a system begins to cover up its own casualties, trust on the front breaks forever, and this fracture has profound repercussions. Soldiers disobey orders, families protest on Victory Day, and telegram channels become outlets for despair. In a country that wants to show absolute strength outwardly, weakness seeps through every internal crack. Even more striking are the security measures mentioned in the report. Barrier units positioned behind their own troops to prevent, even violently, any retreat. Imagine fighting an enemy in front of you and fearing your own behind you. That is not fighting spirit, it's a nightmare. This explains why, according to documents, more than 50,000 men have already deserted, a mass exodus disastrous for any army. As if that were not enough, Moscow, according to these same documents, resorts to mercenaries from Africa, the Middle East, Central Asia, and even over 1,000 North Koreans, many of whom died after a few weeks in combat. That they now supposedly plan to send another 30,000 is not a sign of strength but a desperate cry of weakness. For the United States, this represents a geopolitical bomb. Russia, once a superpower, now depends on external forces while its own society disintegrates. This opens the door to chaos, radicalization, and unpredictable escalation. Let us remember that already in 2023, the Wagner Group attempted to rebel under Prigozhin, only to be divided and destroyed after his mysterious death in a plane crash. The message was clear: those who rebel die. But this has generated paranoia even in the highest ranks, with generals no longer trusting each other, soldiers despising their commanders, and an army held together more by fear than loyalty. For any American wondering what this has to do with us, the answer is everything. As Russia collapses, and, according to documents, Putin didn't even accept peace at the Alaska summit with Trump, demanding more territory, the risk grows that a weak and isolated regime will make dangerous decisions. Energy prices, global supply, chains, NATO cohesion, all are at stake. On the other hand, Ukraine fights with a clear motivation: their home, their family, their freedom. That is the crucial difference. A country with genuine conviction versus another whose soldiers desperately seek a purpose. This is not just a battle for territory, it is a fight for credibility. And for us here in the United States, for you, watching, the question remains: if an army once feared is crumbling from within, what does that imply for the future balance of global power? Will Putin try to prolong his end through escalation? Will he be overthrown? Or are we witnessing the slow disintegration of a superpower? Delving further into this third layer of this shocking reality, it becomes clear that the crisis goes beyond simple clashes, territories, or casualties. It is a deep collapse in the soul, society, and politics that, according to the documents, permeates every corner of Russia. Imagine soldiers who have gone months without rest, physically exhausted, mentally broken, and haunted by endless nightmares. Post-traumatic stress disorders, panic attacks, constant traumatic memories. These are no longer isolated cases but a massive situation. According to reports, there is almost no psychological support available. Instead, the only thing they receive is the harsh order to resist. For us in the United States, this is not just distant news. It reveals the danger posed by a regime that treats its own men as disposable resources and what that means for the stability of a nuclear-armed nation. The situation worsens when looking at the home front. Families who haven't received money for months, payments that either don't arrive or are much lower than promised, and inflation that devours what little remains. Women and children struggling for bread and rent while their fathers and sons die on the battlefield. The document describes mothers who, on May 9th, Victory Day, raise banners in silent protests. For an authoritarian system based on silence and control, these scenes are a ticking time bomb. The same goes for the small but growing acts of sabotage: soldiers delaying orders, making mistakes on purpose, or simply refusing to carry them out. And then there are those incredible reports about officers hoarding or selling food and equipment while their men remain unarmed on the front lines. This is not the image of a victorious army. It is a system devouring itself. The surprise grows when analyzing the alleged disciplinary measures. Soldiers stigmatized as deserters even though they simply disappear. Families that never receive real news about the fate of their sons. Men tied to positions, delivered to certain death under drone attacks. These brutal practices, according to the documented reality, reveal that the system no longer holds together by loyalty, but by fear and terror. For us in America, this recalls the story of Tsar Nicholas II, who in 1917 sacrificed his soldiers and provoked a revolution. Vietnam, where a doubtful army brought down the president. Mali and Sudan, where coups arose from moral collapse. Everything indicates that Putin's defeat will not occur on the battlefield but within his own country. Yet, according to the report, the Kremlin maintains its stance, claiming more territories, rejecting all negotiations, and continuing the fight at all costs. To fill the gaps in their ranks, they resort to desperate measures: mercenaries from over 100 countries, prisoners from Russian jails, and even tens of thousands of North Koreans sacrificed in massive battles. Could there be a clearer sign of system collapse? For Ukraine, this situation represents a unique opportunity. Their forces are launching new offensives, backed by advanced Western technology and motivated by a firm purpose: defending their homeland. This is the classic confrontation, an army that knows why it fights against another that only wonders why it continues fighting. For us in the United States, this is not just a distant conflict but a matter that impacts global markets, NATO security, energy prices, and the stability of a world where Russia was once seen as an equal adversary. Today, this report reveals a tired and divided army, sustained by fear, corruption, and exhaustion. Therein lies the real danger. What will a regime do that knows it cannot win the war, yet cannot afford to lose it? Will it escalate the conflict with nuclear threats, or will it crumble from within, with unpredictable consequences for all of us? That is the unsettling question we cannot ignore. Now, in the final part of this shocking analysis, the focus inevitably turns to the future, and the question of how long this crumbling system can hold. According to the report, Russia already devotes nearly half its state budget to the war, while schools, hospitals, and families are neglected. Factories barely produce consumer goods, instead making weapons exclusively. The economy functions like a machine crushing its own people. For us in the United States, this means witnessing in real time how a country falls into a downward spiral that could also drag global markets. Meanwhile, Ukraine appears united, backed by a society that knows exactly why it fights: their home, their freedom, their survival. This is a deadly difference for the Kremlin, whose soldiers, according to the report, only want one thing: for it all to end. And here, dear viewers, arises the truly explosive question: will Putin fight to the end, even if his people fall apart? Or are we witnessing the beginning of a collapse that could shake not only Russia, but the entire world order?